Minister of Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak to the speech from the throne. I am very proud to be part of a government that is making some very concerted efforts toward improving lives for everyday Albertans. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak particularly to how we are improving lives for Indigenous people in this province as well. As Minister of Indigenous Relations, I know I've had the opportunity to travel this great province for the past just over 12 months, and in that time I've had the opportunity to visit with chiefs and councils and community members from pretty much every reserve in the province of Alberta. I personally have visited as well 34 of the reserves and 3 of the Métis settlements, and hope to, within the next few months, complete my visits to all communities so that we can make sure that the Indigenous people in this province truly feel like they have an opportunity to be represented in this House, which they have every right to be. And of course, over the last number of years, we're never given that opportunity. As some of the previous speakers have mentioned, when we show up at doorways and are told, "I have never seen an MLA or I've never seen a minister," we realize how small the contact group of the previous government was in terms of who they cared to talk to, and therefore, I believe, in who they cared to represent. And one of the things that we are doing that has not been done before is we are making the basic assumption that we represent every single Albertan and not just special groups who are personal friends of the government. And I think that's an important transition in this government. So as Indigenous Relations Minister, I go out into the communities, I speak to them about the things that are important to them, and I ask them that fundamental question: what would make life better for you? The response is, we would really like to be considered to be Albertans for the very first time. Now, to me, that was almost a bizarre response. How can you imagine that you weren't Albertans all along? You live in Alberta, you've been in Alberta before Alberta became Alberta, and here you are. And they tell us that they've never been considered Albertans because the previous right-wing governments in this province have taken the position that there's a jurisdictional divide, and that in that jurisdictional divide, there is a responsibility for First Nations people that resides with the federal government, the major crown. And as the minor crown, that we somehow look at this huge group of people in this province and say to them, well, I know that life is not very good. I know that on the United Nations scales, your life well-being is much less than the rest of the province. We know that the social determinants of health all indicate that your life is much more difficult and less successful than everyone else. But we're still going to pass you off to someone else because we don't have to do anything. And to hear that that's been the response to this community over literally 100 years in this province, and I think particularly over the last 40 years where we've had real resource revenue, we could have been working with the community to build communities, to build school systems, to build water systems, to enable people to come into the modern age and be equivalent to everyone else in this province. That hasn't been done. And I think it's time that we do that. And this government thinks it's time that we do that, and we are taking a very bold and strong stance with regard to how we include the Indigenous people in this province. And I'm very proud of a speech to the throne that says the objective of this government is to ensure the well-being of people. Now, that's a word you hear a lot from us. We talk about people all the time. We talk about people with disabilities. We talk about people in the school systems. We talk about people receiving supports from child welfare. We talk about people who are building the economy through the development of industry and small businesses. But you'll notice what we always do is we talk about people first. And I think that's a primarily important difference in the way the government is working. Our concerns are about how do we actually make life worth living in a way that is a life that we would all want. Many years ago, a leader of our party, J.S. Woodsworth, said that we are to create for others what we would wish for ourselves. And I think that's a fundamentally important truism, and it's one that this government has adopted. So when we look at families, we say, what are some of the things that we know that families are going to face? What are the things that are going to need to be addressed? For example, families have children, fundamental part of many families. So we have increased the amount of monies that are available for families to raise those children. We have increased the supports for the school systems so that those children have teachers in their school. We have increased the number of free meals that are provided in the school system so those children are well fed so that they can learn well. We have increased the opportunity for Indigenous people to speak not only to how they learn the things that we typically learn in school, but how they are personally reflected in the school. So we have signed agreements with Kataskanau and with Musquecheese, and we're working with other communities where we allow them to bring forward information that will help to transform the school. In fact, in our curriculum review, one of the pillars of transformation of the curriculum review is the involvement of Indigenous people in defining their own history, their own life experience, and their own hopes and aspirations as Indigenous people. All of those kind of things are reflections of our commitment to making life better for people, and in this case, life better for Indigenous people. We have multiple layers of success in these areas. We're looking forward to the budget on Thursday because there's going to be a number of other areas. We've said all along, you can't have people live in communities where they don't have the resources that we have off the communities. In places where they don't have water, in places where they don't have adequate housing, and where they don't have the supports they need to be successful. It just shocks me, I guess, from time to time, when I hear people on the other side of the House say, make comments that, they should just, be left to their own devices. And I can't imagine why any society would want a group of people who consistently are found to be struggling more than everyone else, and then be surprised when those people enter into the rest of our society and struggle and end up higher on the scale of the issues that we all regret in our society, issues such as family violence or involvement with the courts or mental health or even physical health in the hospital. What we have decided then is if all of those things are true, then what we need to do is we need to go in and do specific things to change all of the terrible circumstances that lead to a structural deficit. It's not a deficit in the people. The people are wonderful. The people have aspirations, and the people are just like all of us who care for their children, who want to have transitions occur in society, so that they can truly become participants. What's gotten in their way is a complete and constant neglect in terms of providing the resources, providing the supports, and bringing that voice here into this legislature and saying, we as a government care about you. You are Albertans. We will back up our word to you with the resources that are necessary to ensure that your likelihood of success is as great and as forward as the likelihood of success of everyone who lives off reserve. This is the whole message behind our speech from the throne. This is the message that we are a people-first government, that we are going to help this society make a transition at difficult times. We deeply regret that the economy has been so terrible over the last number of years, and we regret the fact that the previous government, who had oil at $100 a barrel, failed to find ways to ensure that that actually made the lives different for people on a day-to-day basis. How can that happen? We have all these resources. Instead, what they do is they cut back and cut back and cut back, and they leave us with really, which is a perfect storm of disaster. An economy that's based on a commodity that's not doing well, an infrastructure deficit that is devastating people's lives, and a history of neglect of the Indigenous people. A three-part storm which has led to, I think, a complete devastation of a community that if they were simply given the supports that are necessary to be successful, the schools that everyone else has, the medical services that everyone else has, the opportunity for employment that everyone else has, would show us their great resilience, their great determination to do well, their commitment to their families, and success overall, just as we would wish for all other Albertans. That which we wish for ourselves, we wish for others. And, you know, it is my intention as the Minister of Indigenous Relations to ensure that that plays itself out over the next couple of years in very specific and concrete ways. We are working on a whole variety of projects that will allow that structural change to occur. Everything from our review of the consultation agreement with the Indigenous communities to ensuring that Indigenous people get on the agency boards and commissions, which they were clearly not represented on under the previous government, to changes in the school system, to changes in the health system, to changes in the child welfare system. It's that kind of commitment with very specific outcomes that I think are very important and that we will deliver on. So all I can say is watch us over the next 2 years. You're going to see some fantastic things. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.